Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bibliophila, where I discuss books that inspire us, enrich our minds and broaden our mental horizon. Let's begin today's episode with a review of yet another book. Today, I'll be talking about a book, Indian Tales by Romila Thapar. Romila Thapar is an eminent Indian historian. Her book contains a retelling of Indian myths and legends, highlighting myriad values of life, for example, friendship, bravery, love and sentiments. Primarily targeting the young readers, Professor Thapar investigates these myths and legends in order to gain a clear idea of the various aspects of the prehistoric and the historic ages. Besides, she presents many stories which drive home words of wisdom. There is no scope for believing these myths and legends in the literal sense. Instead, they should be critically analyzed. Professor Thapar, being a mythologist and a historian, decodes these folk tales through a modern scientific approach. We must keep in mind that though these tales provide us glimpses of human civilization and therefore presented by a historian, they also serve as invaluable gems of Indian literature. Let me now narrate to you some of the tales retold by Professor Thapar along with her tacit interpretations. A story in this book talks about the churning of the great milk ocean by the gods and the demons to get the nectar of immortality. There was once a sage who was widely regarded for his wisdom. Even the gods in heaven acknowledged him. This sage once decided to give a garland to Indra as a token of devotion. But Indra did not know what to do with this garland, and he tossed it over to his elephant, who started playing with it. The sage saw this and he was furious. He cursed the gods so that they become as weak as the mortals. The problem was that the gods and the demons' war was fast approaching. The gods were afraid of their fate and were at the end of their wits. They approached Shiva, Vishnu and Brahma, of whom only Vishnu was able to work out a plan. He told that if the gods could drink a drop of the nectar of immortality, then they would be so powerful that no one would ever be able to defeat them. The gods decided among themselves that they would churn the great milk ocean with the tallest mountain Mandara, and the mighty snake Vasuki was to be used as a rope. They also requested the demons to help them churn the ocean, as they themselves were not strong enough because of the curse. They also promised the demons that the nectar would be shared equally among them. Thus the churning process started. Many valuable articles which had long sunk to the bottom of the ocean floated up to the surface. To their great astonishment, the mountain started to sink into the mud at the bottom of the ocean. Vishnu was quick to act. He converted himself into a giant tortoise and placed himself under the mountain. The poison that floated up to the surface of the water was drunk by Shiva. At last, a sort of a physician came out of the ocean with the pot containing nectar of immortality. As the gods saw this, they ran for it and started quarreling among themselves as to who would get the nectar of immortality first. As they were gullible, as they were quarrelsome, and they had conflicts among themselves, the demons took advantage of their weakness. They snatched the pot and ran away with it. Vishnu was quick to act even this time. He transformed himself into an exquisitely beautiful woman and stood in midst of the demons. The demons decided that they would depend upon this beautiful woman to decide which side would get the nectar of immortality. The young woman, who was in reality Vishnu in disguise, made the gods and demons sit in 2 rows on either side of her. She explained that since they had both put an equal effort into the churning, the nectar must be fairly shared. She then took the bowl to the gods first, assuring the demons that she would see to it that there would be more than enough left for them. Each god took a sip. When she had completed offering it to the gods, the young woman vanished along with the nectar. The demons were wild with anger. They realized that the gods had played a trick on them and started attacking them. A fierce battle took place, with the demons wielding every weapon in their power in an effort to crush the gods. But the gods had drunk the nectar and were now so full of strength that the blows of the demons felt like touch of feathers. This enraged the demons even more. Through their own stupidity, they had not only lost the nectar but also the possibility of ever defeating the gods. Badly beaten, they returned home. It is said that one demon managed to get the nectar of immortality by seating himself in between the sun and the moon gods. This demon, called Rahu, was immediately recognized by the sun and the moon gods, and these gods started to attack him. But since he had already drunk the nectar of immortality, they were not able to destroy him. This demon is placed amidst the planets and at times tries to swallow the sun and the moon gods, and this is why, according to mythology, we have eclipses. We wonder how imaginative and creative these people who created these myths and legends were. The story of the Blue Jackal is a great mythological example of the fate of people who leave their friends and pretend to be someone they are not. There was once a jackal who accidentally fell into a dyer's vat containing blue dye and thus got a blue body. The other animals thought that he was some sort of a heavenly creature who was sent to rule over them. Naturally, they started worshipping him and even brought him the food that they hunted. The blue jackal was cautious enough not to have any other jackals around him who would recognize him, but soon he started to feel lonely. One unfortunate day, he heard some jackals howling in the distance, and he, being excited, responded to their call. The other animals immediately recognized him as a mere jackal and tore him to pieces. This book contains stories which demonstrate how presence of mind and the ability to use a cool head in grave situations could change your destiny. The story of Akbar and Birbal talks about the time when Emperor Akbar sent Birbal and Tansen to the king of Burma with a letter telling the king to execute the bearers. He did so because he wanted to prove to his ministers that Birbal was indeed intelligent and thus his ideal friend. Emperor Akbar believed that no ruler could reign peacefully if his courtiers were dissatisfied with his decisions. The king of Burma was naturally astonished to see such a request from the Emperor of India. He asked Birbal and Tansen to confess their crimes. Both of them denied of having committed any crime. The king of Burma locked them up so that they may get sufficient time to confess their guilt. Tansen was at the end of his wits, but Birbal had already devised a plan. On the day of their execution, Birbal and Tansen started quarreling among themselves as to who would be executed first. On asked the reason for this extraordinary behavior, Birbal said that an astrologer had told Emperor Akbar that if the king of Burma executed Birbal and Tansen, the one beheaded first would be the king of Burma in his next birth and the other would be his ministers. As Birbal and Tansen were both friends of Emperor Akbar, it would be very easy for the Emperor of India to include Burma in his territory. The king of Burma, on hearing this, immediately released the two prisoners. When Emperor Akbar learnt of what had happened, he sent a long letter to the king of Burma telling him the real situation. Birbal, with his superior intelligence, had saved both himself and his friend Tansen from the clutches of death. We must keep in mind that though Birbal resorted to telling lies, he did not harm anybody. Instead, he saved both himself and his friend. The story of the four young men talks about a man who decides to kill himself just because his cousins tease him about his poor condition. He and his brothers had lost their parents and were almost penniless when they reached their cousin's home. These cousins were very rich but totally ignorant. They repeatedly goaded the four brothers about the loss of their parents and their poverty. Ultimately, the eldest brother decided to hang himself, but then a stranger advised him that it would be much better if he and his brothers specialized in a particular art, thus building their own futures instead of killing themselves. Accordingly, the four brothers parted for a year to learn a particular art and decided among themselves to meet at the end of the year to decide all that they had learnt. A year went by, the four brothers returned to the town and soon began boasting about what they had learned throughout the time. They decided to showcase their talents and they went to the forest, took a bone lying there and began their performances. The first brother made muscles grow on the bone, the second brother cast his spell and skin and hair grew on the form, the third brother cast his spell and there lay before them the lifeless body of a lion. The fourth brother was so eager to show off his talent that he was foolish enough to cast his spell and give life to the lion, which immediately devoured all the four brothers. This story was said as a riddle by a goblin to a king. This goblin then asked the king that who was the guiltiest of the four brothers. The king, after much thought, replied that the fourth brother was the guiltiest because even though he knew that if he cast his spell he would be giving life to the lion, he did what ultimately brought about the devastation of the four brothers. Knowledge used in the wrong way could be deadly to humankind. In the legendary story of Naala and the Mayanti, the gods themselves had come down from heaven to attend the Swayamvara of the exquisitely beautiful Damayanti. But unfortunately, she had decided to marry none other than the chivalrous King Naala. When word was spread far and wide about the Swayamvara of Princess Damayanti, King Naala came to know about her beauty and wisdom and also secretly decided to give his heart to none other than her. Naturally, King Naala attended the Swayamvara where the gods confronted him. They ordered Naala to enter Damayanti's chambers and tell her that she must choose only one of the gods to be her husband. Naala, though dumbfounded, could not evade the god's wishes and did as he was told. Damayanti was heartbroken because she had secretly decided to marry none other than Naala himself. But she soon devised a plan. She told Naala to tell the gods that he had delivered his message and now that it was up to Damayanti to decide what she would do. In the Swayamvara, she walked past all the renowned princes and stopped in front of Naala to put the garland round his neck. To her great astonishment, she saw four identical Naalas sitting in front of her, making it impossible for her to decide which one of them was mortal. The other three Naalas were in fact the gods in disguise, who soon understood that nothing could make Damayanti waver from her decision. They gave in and revealed themselves. Naala and Damayanti were soon married. On their way back, the gods met Kali, who was furious because Damayanti had the audacity to choose a mortal over them. He swore to destroy their lives. Many years passed by, but Kali had not forgotten his oath. He took possession of Naala's mind and forced him to enter into a game of dice with his brother, although Naala knew nothing about the game. Naturally, he began to lose all his possessions, wealth, kingdom, and he and his wife were forced to leave the kingdom and wander about in the forest. Naala did not want his wife to suffer because of him and sent her back to her father's kingdom. One day, when Naala was wandering about in the jungle, he saw a forest fire. A mighty snake was caught in that fire and he was shouting for help. Naala was at first afraid to enter into the fire, but he eventually agreed and lifted the snake with both of his hands, which immediately turned into a tiny snake. He carried the snake to a safe place, but to his great astonishment, the snake bit him in the shoulder. It then told him that the poison would indirectly enter Kali's body, who was inhabiting him, and thus destroy the god. The snake also said to Naala, I have also given you a new form so that no one may recognize you, but you will return to your normal self as soon as you have done what you wish to do. If you want to win back your kingdom and live with your wife in happiness once more, then do as I say. Go to the king of Ayodhya. He will employ you as a charioteer. He is very skilled in playing with dice. Learn from him and challenge your brother. When you have done so and wish to get back to your original form, wear these 2 garments which I am giving you and concentrate your thoughts on me." With these words, the snake vanished. Naala was left standing with 2 garments in his hand, more puzzled than ever. According to the snake's commands, Naala went to the king of Ayodhya and learned the secret of the game of dice from him. Meanwhile, Damayanti was growing lonely because of the absence of Naala and worked out a plan to lure him to her father's palace. She sent word to the king of Ayodhya that she would be holding another Swayamvara soon. Naturally, as Naala was the charioteer of the king of Ayodhya, he had to drive the king to Damayanti's father's palace, where he and Damayanti met again and confessed their love for one another. They lived happily ever after. This book demonstrates the considerable freedom of women to choose their husbands in a ceremony called Swayamvara in the early Vedic times. It also demonstrates love, determination, dedication and loyalty. I have discussed some of the 16 stories in this book which never fail to delight the young reader. At the same time, they inculcate various life-changing values in their minds. These stories should not be brushed aside as mere myths and legends. Instead, they should be critically analyzed, not only to gain a clear idea of the past times, but also to change our lives in many good ways. Indian Tales by Romila Thapar is a clear representation of the rich cultural heritage of India. It is full of exciting and entertaining stories, full of enchantment and color of India. I sincerely hope that you have liked this analysis of the book Indian Tales by Romila Thapar. If you have, please do not forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. I have provided the links of my previous videos in the description below so that you may watch them. I'll be back again with an analysis of yet another book. Till then, happy reading.